Hello, everyone. Good evening. It hasn't been that long since I've recorded the last episode, as you definitely know. It's not a secret. But I wanted to put a little bit of an extra shout out in my podcast. And that is my Ko-fi page or coffee, or I don't know. I've heard it pronounced a couple ways. Um, but it's a little website. I have commissions on there. I also just have a general supporting option. You can buy me coffee, it says, but I'll be using that for tea, rest assured. But yeah, if you all would like to support me, support the show, if you're not familiar with me as a person, then pretty please head over there. I could use all the support I can get. But since I didn't necessarily want to post an episode just talking about my Ko-fi, Um, I've decided that I will put an extra little supplemental episode for this part. It's not themed to anything in specific, though I might, if you all ask nicely, do a little episode about Easter. I know that's one of the holidays in the spring that I know of. Um, but other than that, there aren't that many holidays that I can think of that would be interesting to write a horror story about. So, if you all have any suggestions, pretty please let me know if you know me. But today I want to read the story I wrote a little bit ago called Growths. A little bit of a warning, this is a lot of body horror. So if you're not comfortable with that idea, uh, maybe read before you listen. It might just be better that way. But yeah, without further ado, let's get into it. This is Growths. This world is sick. Infections are being dished out left and right with no rhyme or reason, it seems. It's hell, plain and simple. Any surface you touch could host a whole ecosystem of viruses or bacteria that will more than happily crawl through your pores into your bloodstream if you give them half the chance. No matter how you cook something, too, you'll end up puking almost all of it out not even an hour later. The government keeps telling us that we have to keep doing our best. Try not to touch anything, in the world or on your own body, and do your best not to breathe. I swear, if one more person tells me how much time there is before everything goes back to normal, I'm going to cough in their face. There is no normal anymore. This is normal now. Sometimes I think the apocalypse came and went, but pestilence was the only horseman that did its job. Lord knows there's not enough of a military to fight a war anymore, and despite the dangers of contaminations, there's just enough food to scrape by. I guess death could be counted, but he sure does love to procrastinate. Just the other day I saw about the worst case of a slow death imaginable. Some kid was coughing and shivering in the summer heat, sitting on a park bench. Everyone avoided them, of course, but when I came back that way, they were stone dead. The purple-blue face was a sign of asphyxiation, probably pneumonia. They had too much liquid in their lungs to breathe anymore. I guess it was no surprise then that some people's bodies started to change. At the start, we all just kind of thought this might as well happen. One of my friends before the lockdown, who I occasionally locked eyes with and nodded to at the store, started to sprout an uncomfortable looking spine from the back of his shoulder. I never saw it do anything, exactly. It just poked out from his jacket over time, curling into an almost ram's horn shape. I never thought those growths would do what they ended up doing. I wish I never knew. From what I could gather just by looking at the affected, the growths didn't seem to be painful. Then again, it was hard to tell due to the masks that everyone wore, so I suppose they could have all been grimacing during those early stages. Most people had different growths too. You hardly ever saw a close repeat. Spines jutting from backs, arms, legs, flesh sometimes looked as if something had taken a bite from it years ago, and some growths even looked like a whole tree had just taken root in someone's eye socket. And that's not even considering the ones no one saw. The people with punctured lungs, hearts, and brains, dying slowly and isolated in their beds. I guess those were the lucky ones. One night, in winter, I came across someone as they were undergoing one of these infections. I didn't know, because all the news stations were down and I didn't talk to anyone anymore, but The infection hits you hard when it first manifests. The young boy was walking out of the local market as I was walking in, but as I passed him, he doubled over, grunting as if somebody punched him in the gut. I could have kept walking. Maybe I should have. It would have saved me a few more sleepless nights. Instead, I stopped and asked him if he was all right. He turned to me, mask falling off his face, which was contorted in pain. Black veins bulged near and in his eyes. I didn't know what to do, so I just stared back, tightening my own mask. He seemed to be struggling to say something. It was probably going to be something along the lines of help me, but the help turns into a hurt as something made its way up his throat. His eyes darkened until they were completely matte black, his body convulsing as if retching, but there was no air or anything to expel. Then his head snapped up. I saw the first few tendrils, like seeking mycelium, poke out of his mouth, aiming for the sky. Then his face exploded. The front of it cracked, peaked like a tectonic plate, buckling under absurd pressure, before finally giving way to a geyser of matte black and gray growths. They were feathery and floated to the ground as he collapsed. It was almost like seeing a flower unfurl. Not long after that, the growths I saw began to get much larger. The first couple people with growths had all but died, and their bodies didn't get any more fucked up after death. But the new cases I saw were much more dramatic. I can only assume they were more fatal than before, but until the bodies really started to pile on, I had no idea how many were really dying. Some growths that stick most in my mind include a petrified tree branch-like arm with several sharp points, one case with spines covering the upper back like a porcupine, and one body I saw that had a face texture like a pineapple from the mouth up, extending far past where a head should have reasonably ended. I grew pretty numb to all this, so it's only now that I've been rescued that this seems odd, or even frightening now. That was just the way things were. Eventually, the disease started to find a form it liked. Before now, the growths were pretty random in a shape and placement, but what arose from the continued infections got more and more consistent. The first time I saw one of the more common growths, I was walking past an alley on my way back to the store. There was a clattering sound, then a sound like wood being scraped across the asphalt. Curious, and more than a little stupid, I glanced down the alley to see what was happening. I thought it might have been a little girl. At least, it seemed to have the shape of a girl, huddled between two concrete outcroppings. Maybe it was a girl on the inside, but as I got closer, it stood up. Even that action is generous in name. Growth spiraled mantis-like from what used to be arms, and two curved back limbs extended to the ground below it. It took an odd, uneven step towards me, raising what used to be a head. The eye sockets were completely filled with black antlers, almost, that spread to either side through the temples. When it opened its mouth, the only thing that came out was an unfurling of feathery tendrils, each whispering towards me. I fucking ran. There was no way I was leaving my apartment for days after that. I rationed food. I ate the fucking rats. Hell, I almost ate my own clothes. Every time I dared to peek out the window, I saw more and more of the same deformed, gaunt forms walking around. None of them knew I was there, and maybe they wouldn't have bothered me much in hindsight. They might have just been people under all that. But I can't think about that. Not anymore. Not since the remainder of the military went in, extracted anyone undeformed, then torched the rest. I survived. That's all that matters. All the vaccines I got for 2 weeks straight mean that I'll even be healthy for a time. But I don't think any shot, besides one from a gun barrel, will be able to wipe away the things I've seen. If this torched husk of a nation ever fully recovers, which is unlikely in my opinion, the things we've seen might be enough to just call it quits anyway. This world will still be hell, with or without its demons. Okay. That was Growths. That's just like a little short story I wrote, because I had an idea in my head I wanted to get down. I will be honest, I kind of tried to make it as messed up as possible, and you might notice some inspiration from, the pandemic that happened, that big event, remember 4 years ago now? Yeah, I hope you liked it. And yeah, go check out my Ko-Fi. It'll be in the episode description below. I'll do my best to try and get into the other episodes, but if not, just check it out in this one. And I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.